again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
Three of the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
All right, we're back for a Good Friday edition of the podcast. Not a Good Friday for the Ducks, but not many Fridays this year have been Good Fridays for the Ducks. I guess it's Saturday technically for me too. For most people listening to this show who are live right now, it's Friday, and I guess for most of you listening tomorrow, it's probably Saturday. So I'll say it's an Easter Saturday edition of the show. But we're coming to you live after the Ducks 4-2 lost to the Arizona Coyotes. It's just kind of typical game, I think, at this point in the season, right? Ducks played a pretty decent effort. I think Anthony Stolarz had a decent game. There's some crazy goals that we'll get to in this one. Big news is Volkov making his debut, scoring in his debut as well. But, it's just one of those games for the Ducks this year, right, where they played okay. They didn't really get outgunned too much, but ultimately they're at the wrong end of the scoreboard at the end of the night.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of what par for the course for the season should be, right? There were moments, there were moments where they looked solid enough, there were moments where they looked promising, and then there were moments where they just clearly weren't a good team. And it showed. I thought Stolarz did a good job tonight. He looked really good. He's definitely someone who every game he plays, he seems to earn another one. So, especially with Gibby and Miller not having great years, and then needing the rest. I think Gibby's obviously injured right now. I think Stolarz is the one player that you're kind of looking at and like that he's going to get some good run here going into the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys you really want to get some looks at here and how it could shape out next year. So, Stolarz is one of those guys as a potential backup for John Gibson next year. Obviously, Volkov making his debut. I thought he looked pretty good, got some PK time, had a couple good chances, and that ends up getting, his first goal as a Duck too, which was nice. And ultimately, the lineup, I think, was one of the best we've seen all year, and maybe outside of Sam Steele and Sonny Milano, who are still out, and Sam Steele was placed on the IR before this game. If you replace Deslauriers and Grant with Steele and Milano, you've got probably the best lineup the Ducks could ice and have iced all year. So it's signs of some bright spots here. I think Zegras getting his first look with Getzlaf was something that had a lot of people excited, especially since it's his return to the lineup after a couple games out, and then Volkov kind of getting thrown right into the mix here, and essentially a top six. I know it was slated as a third line, but getting to play with Lundestrom and Comtois is a bit above the opportunities that he was getting in Tampa Bay. So it was nice to see him kind of, right off the bat being given some responsibility with some pretty talented players in the Ducks lineup, and given those responsibilities outside of offense on the penalty kill as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that was something I noticed kind of right away, was who he was playing with, and what that kind of showed. Yeah, no, I mean, I said to you before we started that I think this is probably as good a lineup as we've seen all year. You can definitely, maybe theoretically you want to swap, like a Rowney or a Milano, obviously, for Deslauriers and Grant. Between Steele and Backes, I think I'd rather take Backes at this point. But even with that, I thought that was fine. I feel like Jakob Silverberg kind of pulled him on the line up just a base level of competence, and so I felt that there was a benefit. And the rest of the lineup felt really balanced to me. So I think, I think Shattenkirk moving down to play with Hutton was a really good pairing. Manson and Drysdale seemed to be playing pretty well together, and then, Fowler and Hakanpov kind of turned into the de facto number one pair to all things considered right now. So yeah. I think, when you're looking at the way the lineup's built and the way they played, I think that's they've kind of earned another game to just go out there and do this again.
Yeah, I think it speaks again to the confidence of the organization and Jamie Drysdale to play him on his offside like they have so often this year with Josh Manson. And then again, you look at it the way he played in this game, made some very good defensive decisions. There was one in the third period where that just showed his speed was on full display, got back, made a couple of good plays to kind of block the pass and eliminated what could have been a potential 2-on-1 for the Coyotes in that game. I think it was a tied 2-2 game at that point too, so it was a big play from him. Picks up the assist offensively, a nice play for him to kind of keep the play alive, which ended up being the first goal for Volkov as well, and a couple good offensive decisions from him in the game as well, where he just you sit back sometimes, and I know I messaged you this during the game, like you forget he's 18. I know he's 19 in 5 days, but even that, like, this guy, how quickly he's adjusted in only, I think he's getting close to 10 games now. It's pretty unbelievable how quickly he's been able to step into the lineup and really not look out of place at all. Like I think there's this pretty good argument to make that he's been the Ducks' best defenseman since he's been inserted into the lineup.
That's absolutely true. I saw the exact same thing that you saw as far as looking at him playing on his offside with Manson and thinking about how, that's testament to his skill more than anything, as far as, because I think the normal concerns with having to take it on your backhand and having to turn your back to the play and things like that, I think exist for anybody, right? If that's something you're concerned about. But I think for someone so young, the fact that they actually would rather have him do it than force another lefty into the lineup, I think is really telling. Just how talented they think he is, how skilled he is. But yeah, no, he's been the best player, maybe been the best player on the team, to be honest. So I think there is. Oh, sorry, I'm being made fun of for my hat.
I knew that was going to come at some point. Angels lost tonight too, so you're just kind of asking for it.
I don't care about the Angels.
Hey, neither do I. But I know a lot of our fans are obviously Angels fans, so you had to know you were going to get some heat for that hat.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a legitimate argument to be made that Jamie Drysdale's been the best player on the team since he's come down. It's going to be there's going to be a lot of questions now. We have Getzlaf's injury and what that does to the rest of the lineup. He didn't play, I think, past the middle. The 9 o'clock mark, something like that, in the second period. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what that does to the lineup decisions, and if maybe Volkov gets a look at center, I think would be interesting.
Or maybe Trevor Zegras gets a look at center, which would be a nice shift. I mean, at the very least, it should mean Trevor Zegras is in the lineup for the next few games here because Sam Steele's on the IR. Obviously, we don't wish any ill will to Ryan Getzlaf, but if he is out for a few games here, nobody can really come in for Trevor Zegras. I mean, I guess Andrew Agozzino could check in, and I wouldn't put it past Dallas Aikens to take Trevor Zegras out of the lineup to play Andrew Agozzino 9 minutes, which was what they did a couple games ago. But I want to get to this question before we lose it in the chat here from Dave that was talking about Zegras. He said, do you think Zegras needs to add some weight or muscle in the offseason? Seems like he has a hard time fighting in winning puck battles. I mean, it's gonna come, right? Like that's one thing that I think a lot of scouts noted with Trevor Zegras. He's just a bit slight especially when he was drafted. I think he was only like 165 pounds. I think he's done a pretty good job bulking up from last time I saw him. Like the last time I watched a live game of his before the World Juniors and before the NHL this year was his time at BU, and I think at the World Juniors he looked a bit bigger, a bit stronger. He was clearly the most dominant player in that tournament. And then even over the last couple games here of NHL action, I think, I don't think he's having troubles winning puck battles. He's definitely a bit, smaller and slighter than his competition, but he's got the skill that, it almost doesn't matter at this point. And he'll put on that size, as he gets more reps in the NHL and in the off season when he can kind of really focus on what he wants to focus on at development wise. And when we see him step on the ice next year for the 2021-22 season, we'll likely see, I don't want to say a completely different Trevor Zegras, but he'll have that time to really focus on what the organization wants him to focus on.
Yeah, I honestly think it's a bit of both. I do think that he's naturally going to get bigger. He's going to fill out his frame a little bit more. He doesn't shy away from physicality that I've seen yet. He definitely looks to use his skill to mitigate it, avoid it, all that kind of stuff, which is great. Um, but he doesn't avoid it. It doesn't seem to deter him. There are a couple of times I've seen him kind of throw his body in there and get into board battles. But he's got to get a little bit bigger, and that'll happen over the next couple of years. And on top of that, he'll probably have to spend some time just looking to add weight and add muscle mass and things like that. But that'll come, and it's part of getting older. I think for now, the fact that he doesn't look like he's getting completely pushed around or manhandled in any of those kind of corner battle situations, um, is a big sign and a big positive that when he adds it, it'll only make him a little bit better. I don't think it's not covering up for anything. It'll just help him get better.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a comparison here, and I'm not comparing, their kind of projected career paths or anything like that, but just kind of coming into the league as a slight player and then eventually putting on weight and bulking out. And my prime example always of this is Nathan McKinnon. The guy came into the league as kind of a twig, a really lanky player. I mean, obviously supremely skilled player and probably a top 3 player in this league, if not second best behind Connor McDavid. So that's a far stretch. I don't want to say a far stretch, but a very lofty goal for Trevor Zegras to
Third
reach.
behind McDavid and Matthews? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I mean, he's top 3. I would say he's better than Matthews, but that's a whole other conversation for us to get into.
So Matthews was first, McDavid was second?
Yeah, I know Pat would say Matthews is first and McDavid is second. And probably Dave, because Dave just traded me McDavid in our fantasy hockey league. But we're getting off topic here. McKinnon came into the league very slight, and then look at him now. I mean, the guy's probably 215, 220. There was a point, I think, second or third year where he came back from the off season and he just looked like a completely different player. He put on like 20 pounds of muscle, and I think at some point we're going to see that progression from Trevor Zegras. We see it from pretty much every NHL player who's labeled slight when they come into the league, barring maybe Johnny Gaudreau, who's just not really gonna bulk up much more than his frame allows him to. But Zegras is 6 foot, 6'1". He's gonna grow into that frame a bit more. He's gonna put on some muscle. And you're going to notice a difference over the next couple seasons here. It's just going to take him time. And, you think he came kind of halfway into this season in terms of when he really got in and started playing. He's going to get a full off season of development this year and kind of work with the NHL training staff. And they're going to focus on really what they want him to grow in. And I'm sure a lot of that has to be, kind of bulking up his size and adding more muscle. It's what we've seen from guys like Sam Steele and a few of the other Ducks prospects that kind of came in and were a bit underweight, if you want to call it that. So I'm sure it's definitely on the repertoire for Zegras to work on in the off season, and not something I'm too worried about. He'll get to that point eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think just sitting here kind of thinking about it, I think the player to compare him to is he could end up being closer to Corey Perry. I think when you think of putting weight on, you think of guys looking bigger, like a Getzlaf or, Dustin Pemmer in his prime, or Ryan Kessler, guys like that, Milan Lucic, Jerome McGinley. They're there's a physically imposingness to them. Corey Perry was just tall and long, and, he managed to put enough muscle on to allow him to hold his own in, the dirty areas or the real physical areas of the thing, and he was able to excel. So I think, I don't think he's ever going to look buff, but I think he can definitely fill out enough that he'll be able to go into the corners and not have any issues. Yeah. I don't think he's going to get taken advantage of.
He'll have no problems engaging in the physical areas of the thing. All right. Well, let's get past the first period. I want to break down this game kind of period by period here. We talked about the Volkov goal a bit, in the right place in the right time. He did as much as he really could in his debut here. I do want to talk about the Silverberg goal and some of the other goals in this game, because this is one of the weirdest games I've seen in a while when it comes to just really weird goals, and about 3 or 4 of them. The Silverberg one was like a deflection that bounced off the boards out front to Silverberg. He kind of directs his foot, and it goes into the net. I think that was the right call. I had a lot of people saying it was the wrong call, but you're allowed to direct your foot You're allowed to kind of, angle your foot for the puck to bounce off it and go into the net. You just can't do any kicking motion. Really get your thoughts on that, but I think, he definitely angled his foot. There's no question about that. But I don't think there's any distinct kicking motion. So I think the refs got the right call here in calling it a goal for Silverberg. But I know a few people were thinking that this would have been called back here.
Yeah, I honestly thought it would get called back. I think, I think he definitely turned his foot, but I do think he kind of hacky sacked it, which to me is a kick. I think that's right about where the line is as far as what they're going to call on the ice and what they may be less inclined to overturn. I think there wasn't quite enough to make it obvious, and I think they're always going to defer to just letting the calls. But I think the Ducks got the benefit of the call there. I definitely felt that if that would have been called back, it would have been justifiable for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that are kind of right on the edge. I mean, I agreed with the eventual call on the ice, but it is one of those situations where it was a call the goal on the ice. It would have had to have been completely obvious to overturn it at that point. For that to end up going, not going the Ducks' way. But then you look at the goal that happened right after that for Arizona, just a ridiculous bounce off the stanchion. And as it always is this year, if you're playing against the Ducks and you need your first NHL goal, it's gonna come. And Lane Peterson gets probably the luckiest and easiest first NHL goal that we've seen in a while, outside of maybe an empty net goal, because it bounces right off the stanchion, right to him. He's got a one-on-one with Anthony Stolarz, and he makes a good move. I got to give the guy credit for your first, I think it was his NHL debut in this game, and to have the confidence to make a move like that around Anthony Stolarz and tuck it into the net. It's a good move from him, but it's one of those things where it becomes a meme at this point. But it just seems like if you're making your NHL debut at the Ducks, or if you're a team that has a young player and you want him to make his NHL debut, do it against the Ducks because he's likely going to score.
Yeah, no, I felt bad for Jay that Jay wasn't able to really jump on this one tonight because I know he loves that. But it was a nice move. He made a great move around Stolarz. Stolarz is, you hear it 1,000 times on the broadcast. Stolarz is tall. He's got, long legs and stuff like that. And he perfectly pulled it around Stolarz and he got it in. And good move. It's a bad break, but, you can chalk it up when you get the benefit of that Silverberg call and things like that. So.
Yeah, and you look at the next goal too. It's a Volkov own goal, which is kind of a disappointing one. Not much he could do on that play. He gets dragged down and kind of just hits him. And luckily for the Coyotes' sake here, it goes into the net before he takes the net off the mole ring. So that's a disappointing one, tough one for Stolarz too. And then this last goal, we get another review here where Schmaltz fires it from the point, and I believe it was Bunting who was in front of the net. Ducks challenge for goaltender interference. I think this is another one where it was kind of a borderline call, where I think if it was called no goal on the ice, it probably stands as no goal. But since it was called goal on the ice, it's really hard to overturn this and say that there was obvious goalie interference here. But he was going and skating through the crease. He was impeding with Anthony Stolarz a little bit, but just not really kind of pushing him off, pushing him out of the way or really interfering with him enough where I think they can overturn the call.
Yeah, I actually missed that one because I had to step into the kitchen, but I don't think, based on what I heard, it didn't sound like it was a big deal, so I don't know.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, he kind of skates slightly backwards and finds himself right.
Oh, wait, no. This is what I wanted to say about that. I'm so sorry. I was just thinking about this. That was the one that, it was the, okay. But the thing I thought was interesting about that was that he called it with the 3 minutes left in the game. And I think between that and him going to the 6-man power play at the end of the game, I'm really, really curious how much of some of these lineup decisions that he makes are influenced from the front office. Because the 11-7 guy doesn't seem like the guy who's going to go take a risk to have to kill a penalty with 3 minutes left and on a power play go 6-on-4 with an empty net. I just think those are more aggressive and progressive moves than some of the lineup decisions, and it really makes me wonder if he can't make a lineup to save his life and he just gets certain decisions right, or if he's being meddled with.
Yeah, and it's hard to tell because you could argue both sides of it, right? Like I know maybe a little bit more than other GMs, Bob Murray is pretty hands-on and when it comes to kind of lineup decisions and what Dallas Eakins is doing. And when you look at, Dallas Eakins not being a, Mike Babcock when it comes to experience and could just say, F off to the GM, he kind of really has to do what Bob Murray says when you look at the kind of wealth of experience that Murray has compared to the lack of experience that Dallas Eakins has as a head coach. And Dallas just kind of seems one of those guys kind of happy to be there and will do whatever he can to please Murray at this point. So it is kind of hard. And I think when you ask a lot of Ducks fans to kind of place blame, it is kind of hard to place the blame there when it comes to lineup decisions. I think, some things like Zegras's, management and the minutes he plays and the situations he plays in, I think it's easy to put the blame on Eakins, but we don't know if that directive is coming from Bob Murray or not, and whether that's that's a mantra that he's kind of putting in place and saying, hey, we got to do this with Zegras. If he's out there, don't put him in these situations, play him this amount of time, whatever. So it's really hard to kind of judge who that's coming from, whether it's from Eakins or Murray. But you can make the argument that kind of both are to blame or both are at fault for it.
It's funny. I think if you think about it, like we've heard Murray multiple times now mention that he wants to bring in a veteran coach to play, or not to play, but to have work with Eakins and kind of help him through. And it's funny because he kind of just doesn't seem to trust Eakins completely, and he wants to bring in someone to kind of mentor him on the job. And then you think about what they're doing with Zegras and the way that they're slow playing him so significantly, it really does start to feel even more institutional. And I don't want to say that maybe, Eakins completely agrees with all of these decisions. And so he's part of the problem and not someone who's kind of being forced into a bad spot. We don't know either way. Both are just as likely. I mean, it's just as likely since he was hired that he feels similarly. But it does seem to be institutionally when you look at the way that Murray has publicly talked about wanting to get Eakins some help.
Yeah. I think that's one thing we really haven't even dug into that much is the quotes from Murray that he wants to go out and get like a veteran assistant coach to help Dallas Eakins along. And I mean, essentially,
he mentioned it in the LeBron
interview.
interview.
And I thought, and I guess he was for a while, that Daryl Sutter was that guy as an advisor, right? That was kind of the reason he was brought in, was to be that kind of, veteran voice for Dallas Eakins when it comes to decisions and support. And obviously Sutter went to Calgary to become their head coach, and now there's that void, and I think Bob Murray's looking to fill that, and that is an off-season thing. But, when we sit here and talk about, are Eakins and Murray going to be back at the end of this season, I think, with that and Murray looking at decisions he's going to make in the offseason, I think he at least believes that he's going to be back. He believes that Dallas Eakins is going to be back for next season, and he hopes to bring in, veteran help on the coaching side. I don't think that's the worst decision. I think if your goal is to keep Dallas Eakins around, I don't think it hurts him bringing in a guy with a bit more experience who's kind of been there and done that. We had an assistant like that when we had Paul McLean, in terms of a guy who's kind of been around everywhere and done a lot in coaching. So to go out and get that guy wouldn't be the worst thing.
Isn't that a different situation though? Because Paul McLean came in and helped too. It was at the end of Boudreau.
Near the end, I believe.
Okay, so Boudreau, he'd been a coach for a while. He'd been the coach of the Ducks for a while. He had obviously had a long stint in Washington. Like, I think bringing in a guy who has been a head coach to run your special teams is very different. And like, especially when you say this is instead of when you give someone this kind of ambiguous title, like, special advisor to the president or whatever the hell. And it's just like, well, what does he do? Well, he's there in case Dallas wants to talk about something. So he's a big brother, he's a mentor, he's like, what is he? Like, And it's like, well, he's just a resource that we all thought would be good, provide some extra experience and some different perspective. It's like, okay, but what did he do? I think that's very different. And it kind of bothers me a little bit because it's kind of, to me, a worse version of the stuff that they're doing with Zegras as far as just completely um, refusing to give them the full run of the mill when they seem to. I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen something like this with a head coach before. I remember Mike Yeo, I think, went and worked under Hitchcock for like a year or something
Yeah.
in St. Louis, but it's never been we're bringing in someone on top to put over them, but they're not really like I don't know. It just feels like you either believe Aikens is the guy or you don't, but you need to give him the authority and the space to do his job. And if all you're talking about is how, at the end of last season it was I didn't get involved enough. And this season it's we need to bring him in some help. It's like, are you trying to bring him in, or are you trying to bring in help, or are you trying to bring in a new coach? Because if you don't think Aikens is it, which it almost doesn't feel like you do, it feels like you're being pushed into this, then you're doing everybody a disservice by not just firing him or quitting, like
Yeah.
Jim Rutherford did, which we should encourage more of, I think.
It is a bit of a weird situation, right? Like, if he says he has full confidence in Dallas Eakins, but says he needs to get him veteran help to, aid him along, I guess, in his development as a coach. I mean, he's a young coach in comparison to other guys, but he's not really that young. And how long are you going to give this guy to really get established and get things going, and how much of a difference is bringing in a guy who's been around, been a head coach in different places, is now kind of near the end of his career, and is going to come in as an assistant coach or an assistant to Dallas Eakins just to kind of help him along the way with certain decisions. At some point, you just kind of lose faith that Dallas Eakins can be a head coach in the NHL, and you lose faith in Bob Murray's kind of judgment and his decision-making process when he says he has full confidence in Dallas Eakins and his abilities, but he needs to get him help. And like you said, where does that then now turn to? Okay, let's just go get a new head coach instead. Well, let's skip the whole process here, bringing him in help and seeing if that works, and go out and just get a new head coach. And I think for a lot of people, they're getting to that point because this is really the first year where we've seen a lot of decisions that seemingly are made by Dallas Eakins go wrong. I think if you ask a lot of people going into this year, there was still a lot of faith in Dallas Eakins, and we got to give him time and whatnot. A lot of I think a lot of those sentiments were similar across the fan base. I think if you polled it now, and you look at the poll that The Athletic put out, I think a week ago now, there's a lot of people who've kind of flipped on it and think the complete opposite here, that Dallas Eakins has made some pretty poor decisions this year, and that his time might be up in Anaheim. I still am kind of on the fence there, because I was one of the people who was saying we should give him a long leash and let him have time to kind of develop as a coach. But there are some big decisions that I think he is the orchestrator of that have really kind of turned me off from him as a head coach.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. And there have been a number of decisions that he has made this year that give you every reason to be skeptical of him being the guy going forward. I definitely agree that he should be given a long leash, and I don't think 1 year is enough. And I think if they didn't do it earlier in the year, then he should be given the rest of the season at this point to see it out and see what he can do. But he's either very bad at this, or he could be good and he's being prevented from that by above him. And both of them are a problem. And I think that's the question that ownership has to ask, right? Because I don't know. It really bugs me, this idea that it's not that we're bringing in what I mean? Like even the Lamoriello and the Dubas thing, right? Shanahan was like, I'm bringing in Lamoriello and I'm promoting Dubas and I'm going to have them work together.
Yep.
But I want Dubas to learn from Lamoriello about how to do this. And then it got to the point where Lamoriello was like, well, I don't want to leave or whatever. But that's very different. And again, even the Mike Yeo situation where he comes under Hitchcock and he learns, and they're like, eventually he's going to take over. This is putting someone on top of them, and it just feels so weird, and it doesn't feel like there's an institutional belief that Akins is the guy going forward. And if that's true, why is he still there?
Yeah, and I honestly think that's kind of the question right now. And one that will likely get answered in the offseason, because I think there isn't a ton of optimism that both, if any, of both of these guys in Dallas Eakins and Bob Murray are going to be gone in the offseason. It's not a similar situation where you look across the league and at some of the very, very bad teams in this league where you could sit and say, okay, like there's no chance this guy's back. The Sabres have made their moves on the coaching side of things, and honestly, their general manager could be next out the door if they can't turn things around here. There's a bit of a sense there that things are going to happen and moves are going to be made. I think on the Anaheim side of things, I don't know if I trust the ownership per se to get Bob Murray out of here at this point, just because of how much he's done for this franchise and I guess how much weight he carries organizationally to say he would be out. I think you brought this up a few times. It's not so much that he'd get fired, but that he'd get promoted into a different role.
Right.
They're not going to pay two general managers and one of them not even work with the organization anymore. It would be a promotion for Bob Murray into a different role.
Yeah, I also don't. I think they think more of him than that. I think that they and him would view that as disrespectful, and I don't think they would do that to him unless this goes way off the rails. I don't see them just dumping him like that.
Is this not already way off the rails, though, in the sense that the Ducks are the second worst team in the National Hockey League behind a team, or just in front of a team that lost 18 games in a row?
I mean, yeah, but what's changed between now and when it was really bad, 2 weeks ago? And they didn't fire him then.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like that might be the only thing that it would get to a point where it'd be so bad that you'd have to make a move, is that if the Ducks went on a Buffalo Sabres type losing streak where it was like a 10-plus game losing streak where you could sit back and say maybe they'd be forced into something. But even that's not super, inconceivable that it couldn't happen. Like, could I see the Ducks going on a 10-game losing streak at some point in the last little stretch of the season here? I don't think it's impossible. Like, I definitely think it could happen, or a stretch where they lose kind of 8 of their next 10. It's not like they're a team who wins that many games this year that it's impossible for them to do that. But even then, I don't know if I would say that Dallas Eakins or Bob Murray would go. I think it's just par for the course of this season that the Ducks are a bad team and they're gonna lose more games than they win. And if you lose 8 of your last 10 or 9 of your last 10, it's kind of right on par with how you've been playing all season anyway.
All right, here's what we're gonna do. Next game is against Arizona. Do you think that's a win or a loss?
I think it's. I don't want to turn this into a downer pod, but I would think it's a loss just based on how much that game means for Arizona. Just like this one, they just leapfrogged the Blues into a playoff spot. It means so much more for the Coyotes to come out and play hard for that game.
San Jose, we should say, should be a pick'em, right?
Yeah, but even the Sharks, again, some momentum after their win tonight, and they're pushing for a playoff spot
too. They're still old. Yeah, but they're still old. They suck. Okay, Colorado and Vegas.
Those are likely losses.
Right. So there is 5 of those left in April alone. 3 games against the Sharks, 4 against the Kings, and then 1 against the Kings, 2 against Seattle, 2 against Minnesota. I don't think it's out of
Seattle?
the question. Not Seattle. St. Louis. I was just thinking STL. I'm sorry. But man, there's a very good chance that they don't get to 20 wins this year. What are they at right now?
What, wins-wise?
13?
12.
Yeah. There's a very real chance that they do not get to 20.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a good chance they don't get to 20. And again, I like... Even if they don't get to 20 or they go on a losing streak, or like I said, they lose 9 of their last 10, it's not really that much different than the way they've been playing all year, right? Like, it really isn't. It's slightly worse than the way they've been playing. So I really can't see much happening here where they would feel like they're hard pressed to fire Dallas Eakins or move on from Bob Murray mid-season. It just feels like an off-season move at this point here. All right, we got to move on for this because there is one thing I want to get to because we talked about Drysdale a little bit earlier. I didn't even realize this until somebody tweeted it out post-game that this was Jamie Drysdale's 7th game, so he's officially counted as his first year of his entry-level contract, which, I mean, the Ducks aren't going to send him back down to San Diego at this point. He was just playing so well that they had to keep him up at this point. I think the interesting thing to note, though, is, the OHL season or the chance of an OHL season has been severely hampered with another lockdown coming in place essentially now, as of today, in Ontario for another month period here, where that likely means the OHL won't begin in the month of April. At the earliest, it would be in May, and at that point, you're really pushing it to try and have a regular season. I honestly, at this point, I think the OHL's not going to have a season. I don't think it's going to happen at all. I don't see how you can begin in May and properly have the 20 to 25 game season that they were hoping for, because then you'd be looking at an end date of around June or July, and that's past the draft. Like, you have to be finished that season before the draft, I think, if you're going to actually have it run. So you're looking at that ending before June 24th or 25th when the draft is usually scheduled. So that means Jamie Drysdale might be able to stay here for the entire year and get playing time in San Diego if they wanted to do that. I don't think he's going to get sent back down at all at this point. I think the only place I saw him going back to was Erie if the OHL season started, and that being an option for the Ducks to say, okay, he looked good here, but we're going to send him back down to the OHL and let him have some playing time. But now that he's begun his ELC, there really is no argument to send him back to the OHL, even if they do have a season. Like, you've already burned the first year. You might as well just keep him up here at this point.
I mean, I simply think he's just too good. I think that they need him at this point. I've joked about this with you, on the side, but it really is one of those things where I'm trying so hard to pump my brakes because I think this kid is really good, and I'm trying not to get ahead of myself mentally. But I don't think that they can afford to send him down. I don't think the OHL is going to have a season. I think they're waiting until the last possible minute to announce it for whatever reason. I don't think that makes sense. I think, if I was a sponsor, an investor, or someone who was, involved, I would almost want them to say, we're officially not having this season, but we're starting right now on next season. That would probably make me feel better and just call it. But I don't think that they can afford to just... that's usually why businesses wait so long to say something that they know is true. It's just because it's going to cost them money. So I would imagine the OHL is waiting as long as humanly possible to have to say that, but they probably already know that.
There's probably an internal kind of date that is set for, if the season doesn't begin after this point, there's no chance. I can't see that. I mean, it's a nightmare PR move. In the middle of a province-wide lockdown to be like, yep, we're going to have our season and it's going to start in the middle of a lockdown. So that's why, I can't see it starting until May. And unless you're starting, first week of May or maybe second week of May at the latest, I don't see how you can squeeze in a 20-game season in there to salvage anything at this point. And, it's good news for the Ducks in the sense that you don't have to make that choice, that Drysdale then can stay in the NHL, and if you don't want him in the NHL for any reason, I don't know what reason you wouldn't want him in the NHL at this point, but then you do still have that San Diego option for the rest of the year. And as Operation mentioned in the chat here, that the Ducks can keep Drysdale up for the entire NHL season as it remains, and then they can send him down to San Diego for the playoffs.
Didn't the AHL already announce they weren't going to have the Calder Cup this year?
They may have. I might have missed that announcement. That's possible for sure. But there could be some playing time near the end of the season where Zegras, I keep saying Zegras. Well, I guess it was Zegras and Drysdale get some playing time with San Diego outside of the Ducks organization. So it'll be interesting to see. But it's good news for the Ducks that they don't have to make that decision. We're going to see Drysdale likely for the rest of the season, and he can't hit that accrued season limit that is hampering Trevor Zegras' play time at this point, because Drysdale can't, I think, officially play 27 games, even if he played every game to finish out the season here for the Ducks. So I think he would just come in just shy of that, around like 25 or 26 games. And he's deserved it, man. You can't say enough good things about this kid, and it makes you excited for next year when you see the progression from Zegras and Drysdale heading into kind of next year's season in a full 82 game season. That it's, as we mentioned on a couple shows ago, it's likely going to be a quicker progression than what we've seen from Jones and Terry and Comtois and Steele, where these guys are supremely talented players. And that uptick in production from the first season to the second season is something that we're likely going to see more evident with these guys, and hopefully it's something that we're going to see come a little bit quicker, right? I think that's something that Ducks fans are really eager to see, is that progress, that year-on-year progress from these top guys and these top prospects.
Yeah, I think at this point, the next on-ice thing Anaheim fans have to truly look forward to, just beyond watching different players try to improve over the course of this year, is hopefully we have something close to normal next year, and we have a prospect game before the season. I know how that's how Troy Terry and Isaac Lundestrom popped early in their careers, Maxim Comtois as well. And if we start to get Pro and Colangelo and Tracy and Thrun and Lakeham and some of these guys, all on the ice together, and really see kind of where they're at and what we may have. Give Gruel another summer, give Hunter Drew another summer.
Had to throw him in there, eh?
I had to get both of our guys in there. I thought it was only fair, but I just, I think that's really could be very exciting as far as having something to kind of see beyond what we've seen this year from the young players. But yeah, there's a lot of positives to take away right now, I think. And I just think at this point, it's just kind of about trying to just get through the rest of this year without going crazy.
I think an interesting tidbit from that OHL discussion we just had is, if they don't have a season, this also affects Jacob Perreault as well, where he wouldn't be going back to starting. I know he's injured right now, but I mean, not bad production with the goals, 5 points in 11 games. If he goes, I think he would start back in San Diego after the injury. I don't think it's out of the question, though, to say the Ducks wouldn't hand him an NHL debut if there was no OHL season near the end of the year. The last 2 or 3 games of the season. They've done that with some of their prospects in the past, where just for those last couple of games they've thrown them in just to get an NHL debut in and get some playing time. I wouldn't say it's out of the question to see Jacob Perreault, and that would be another debut I'd be pretty excited to see. Even if he doesn't look ready, which I don't think he is, it would be nice just to see a guy, a supremely talented finisher like that in this Ducks lineup, and just see what he can do, and put him in the best possible situation for him to succeed, right? Maybe playing with a Getzlaf or Zegras, play him on the power play and put him in that kind of prime Ovechkin type position, and see what he can do. I mean, that's where he's been utilized in San Diego, and I remember the couple games I watched from him in preseason and in the regular season, he was just ripping pucks from that, and he was the main go-to guy on the power play when he was put in that position. So I would love to see a Perreault debut for the Ducks this year, even if it was just 1 or 2 games, just to see what he can do.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, I was just looking right now, his birthday is April 15th. So by the time you get to the end of April, beginning of May, he'll be 19. And I wonder if, given that, and given that he has had some experience playing in the AHL this year, if that does make them more likely to give him 2 or 3 games at the end of the year, and see just if there are any early returns, at least on his shot converting at the next level, and him doing the rest of the things he needs to do to become the top 6 goal scorer, that he seems to have the potential to be.
Yeah, he's like the next one in line, right? He's the next kind of exciting one in the sense that we've seen Zegras and Drysdale for a decent amount of time in the NHL this season. The next in line, and the next top prospect for the Ducks is Jacob Perreault. And
Yeah, I think it's him and Dostal kind of tied.
for sure. Yeah, definitely Dostal as well. And we might even see that by the end of the year, too, where the last couple of games of the season, maybe Dostal's handed his NHL debut as well, or comes in, as a relief in a game if he has to. But I think they would rather hand him a start rather than, a backup job that he has to come in the middle of the game for. So those are the two big next ones. I think they're, kind of long shots in the sense that, they don't have to do it this year, and it would be something that we wouldn't see until the end of the season. But it would be fun to get both of their debuts in before we call it quits on this shortened season. One thing I do want to get to, because not the waivers situation over the last couple of weeks has put some speculation on a ton of players that the Ducks could claim. Shane Gostisbehere went on waivers between the last podcast and this one. He ended up clearing, obviously, but he's a guy that you talked about in just kind of trade discussions that we've had over the year, and a guy you'd be interested in the Ducks picking up. Obviously, that didn't happen, and he ended up clearing waivers, which was slightly surprising, but not too surprising, because Henrique cleared waivers, and I think that's a very similar situation in terms of cap and term and the impact they were having at the time that they were sent down. So that one wasn't super surprising, but Evgeny Svechnikov was just put on waivers this morning by the Detroit Red Wings. That one seems right up the Ducks' alley in terms of why not claim this guy. A former 19th overall pick in 2015. He's only 24, makes the league minimum. He's a restricted free agent at the end of this season, so you still do have control in being able to be the kind of the first rights to sign him to an extension, and it wouldn't likely cost you that much because he's been in and out of a Detroit Red Wings lineup that hasn't been good this year. And he's got 3 goals and 5 points in 10 games. Just feels like, one of those why not take a chance on this guy type things, similar to Volkov, right? And clearly we're willing to bring in Russians, so I'd be all for this one. This would be a big waiver claim, I think, for the Ducks to take a chance on.
Yeah, I think this is I think this is in what you're trying to do. I think this is similar to how I felt when I saw that Tyler Ennis had hit waivers. He's a guy, with some skill. I think Tyler Ennis, unfortunately, was kind of the modern bottom 6 guy, but he was just a little too old. Because he's a good player, drives play, he can play in a 3rd and 4th line role. And I think Svechnikov, just gives you kind of goal scoring upside, and it's just another shot at putting someone in your lineup who can generate goals. I think it's worth mentioning that there's really no way, as far as the Gostisbehere thing is, there are 4 teams in the league that could afford to move his cap hit in right away with no issue. Now, I'm sure there are more than a couple of teams with potential IR guys that they can move to LTIR and stuff like that. But there was very little real danger of him ever getting claimed. And, he's probably the best or second best player to kind of hit waivers like that this year. When you look at him, you look at Johnson, you look at Gostisbehere, who I think is probably the best of the 3. But I just think the waiver thing isn't weird, and I think everybody knows that it's weird, and so I don't think there's really any risk at this point of players kind of being picked up on it. That being said, because there isn't a cap hit, because they seem to be actually looking right now to bring in goal-scoring potential, Svechnikov is exactly the type of player that it would make a lot of sense for them to do, but I'm not 100% sold that they will.
Yeah, he just kind of similar to Volkov in the sense that, former 2nd-round pick for Volkov, a guy that is playing way down in the lineup in a very good team. They brought him in the hopes that playing him up in the lineup, you can kind of rediscover that potential, change the scenery type situation there where he comes in and maybe doesn't fulfill the potential they had when they drafted him in the 2nd round, but comes in and can kind of get close to being an everyday NHL player. And I think the same thing can be said with Svechnikov, and maybe even more so. When he was drafted 19th overall in 2015, he was one of the best goal scorers in that draft, had some exceptional hands, and then coming in at 6'3", in 2015, that was like the total package, right? The power forward, the goal scoring Russian winger, and I don't even want to say he hasn't really fulfilled the potential yet, because he just really hasn't been been given the opportunity with Detroit to do that. And even this year, he's averaging just over 10 minutes in ice time. He has 3 goals and 2 assists in 10 games played. It's not like that's bad production. That's usually something that you would think on a bad team would keep you in the lineup. And it's a weird decision, I would say, from the Red Wings to waive a guy like that who is a restricted free agent at the end of the season and is only 24, and to move on from an asset like that. It's just one of those ones you sit back and you say this is a no-brainer for some team to take a gamble on. Why not the Ducks? Which is probably why we're going to wake up tomorrow around noon and find out that he cleared waivers and nobody took a chance on him. So I would love him. I mean, it is tough to, I guess, slot him into the Ducks lineup in the sense that there is already a logjam of young players. But I think you just kind of pick them up and figure it out, right? It never hurts to bring in another young asset into the organization and see how they can do. And when you look at the lack of real goal-scoring talent here, why not take a chance on a guy who at one point was considered, one of the best goal scorers in that draft class? It's worth a gamble. He's only 24. There's plenty of time for him to turn it around.
Yeah, no, he's got 9 points in 30 games, 5 goals. It's definitely one of those things that's weird. I mean, I don't know if it's similar to the Daniel Sprong situation where on paper the numbers look a little bit better than what you see. Because I am not a masochist, I have not subjected myself to much Detroit hockey these last few years. So I can't speak to, what issues he's had on the ice. But it's absolutely worth it. It's a free shot at somebody. I don't know. It's not really a first-round pick, but it's a guy who went in the first round at one point. You're getting a free shot. It's going to cost you nothing. Worst comes to worst. He doesn't work. You waive him, and you lose him for nothing. And so, yeah, I think there's every reason to do it. There's nobody really in the lineup right now. Maybe for a couple, but, I don't think there is any reason that you couldn't give him 2 or 3 games in a row. They've been comfortable sitting Danton Heinen. No problem. Zegras, Steele, things like that. So I think you can bring him in, give him a couple of games, see how he does. And if it doesn't work, you waive him, send him down. And if he clears, he clears. And if not, well, you got to try out for free. So
if he wasn't Russian, it feels like the type of guy Bob Murray would jump on, right? Like a 6'3", 220-pound power forward who can score. That's Bob Murray's type player right there, right? It kind of similar to Max Jones in that sense. Svechnikov is a pretty gritty player himself. And then also, again, the Bob Murray type of thing here is he loves those kind of, revival stories. The guys who were original, first round picks at one point or second round picks and to bring him in. But hey, with Volkov coming in, the Russian thing maybe goes out the window. And I joked with you before the podcast here, if we could somehow get Galimov out of his KHL contract, pick up Svechnikov off waivers, we could all of a sudden roll out a Russian trio of Volkov, Galimov, and Svechnikov in the lineup for the next couple coming games here, which would be it's got to be the first in Ducks history, a Russian trio rolling out on one line. I can imagine there hasn't been too many Russians in the Ducks organization over the last,
I was going to say, I'm trying to think of a time where there may have been 3 Russians on the ice.
In the lineup at all, yeah. When Fedorov was there, what it would have been Fedorov and...
Fedorov, Soleil, but he was Belarusian, so that kind of doesn't count. I don't think Brizgalov was
Chistov
around
in the lineup when Fedorov was there. Maybe it was a Fedorov-Chistov pairing there, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, no. Look, that's what they should be doing. They should just be taking flyers like that for no real reason. They have nothing to lose. It's interesting. You said, what did you said? Oh, I was thinking about. You said the point about if he was Canadian. Stefan Mason, the guy we got in the Bobby Ryan deal.
Yep.
Who was the proper prospect in that with the pick and all that. He kept getting claimed on waivers. He definitely, I know, had some upside as a middle 6 winger or whatever, and injury kind of really messed with his career. But, if a guy like that is going to be part of a waiver wire tag, it's really hard to think that a guy who went 19th overall and is a power forward doesn't have as equal a shot at being given the opportunity to wash out of two or three separate organizations on his own merit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly can't fathom waking up tomorrow and Svechnikov clears waivers. Like, some team out there is going to take a shot on him. He's only, like I said, 24, restricted free agent, league minimum. Why not? Like, it's a guy you could almost say you would trade for. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if I had a back when Volkov got acquired, if it was Antoine Morand and a conditional seventh for Evgeny Svechnikov, right? Like, I could see that being a deal that could happen, that a team would take a chance on him. So I imagine, the opportunity here to get a guy like that in for free is enticing a few GMs. And when you look at the fact that the Ducks are at the kind of top of that list based off the standings right now, to have a chance to acquire him, I think outside of Buffalo, we debated this before the show on who would have first dibs over the Ducks in Ottawa, and I'm not kind of up to date off the top of my head on what kind of tiebreakers there are for the waiver wire situation. Maybe with the loss tonight, the Ducks are below Ottawa in points percentage, so that might tip them over the edge. So as long as Buffalo doesn't put in a claim for Evgeny Svechnikov, he might be a Duck tomorrow. I mean, that'd be a nice way to wake up in the morning to kind of a new addition there. But I want to get to a couple questions we had. We were talking about some of the Gulls prospects and some Ducks prospects a couple minutes ago, and a few people in the chat had some questions about some of the guys in San Diego. First one was DB Lowry asked about Eric Sinek, the current Gulls starter who's been on a tear. I mean, Lucas also started on a tear, won his first 5 games and then lost 7 straight. But Eric Sinek, I think last time I checked in on him, so there might be a loss or a couple more wins in here. He'd won 4 games in a row. He was 5-1-0 on the season, and he looked pretty good. Never a guy who was really hyped up as much as Dostal was and Dostal was hyped up for good reason, don't get me wrong, but it's been Lucas Dostal for a while. But another good one in the pipeline with Ole Eric Sinek. I think he has a potential to eventually get some NHL games under his belt in the not so distant future, whether it's with the Ducks or another organization here. But he has looked pretty good for the Gulls so far this season, and there's never a bad thing to have goaltending depth in your organization and guys who can kind of step in, especially with Ryan Miller moving on here, to have Stolars and Dostal and Eric Sinek as kind of guys you could lean on potentially in the future as backups to John Gibson, or dare I say it, potential successors in Dostal's case. It's not a bad situation to be in, that's for sure.
No, I mean, I remember when he was drafted, it was kind of treated as like this is a good, solid prospect who has all of the tools to make the leap to the NHL. It'll be about development and things like that, but the signs are there that it could happen. It won't be anytime soon. It's still John Gibson's net, that whole thing. And that seems to kind of just be what it is still. He seems to be a player who's coming along. He's developing. He's playing well, and he'll probably, like you said, earn himself a shot. I would imagine probably next year if he sticks around. Maybe he's claimed or traded or something like that, so they don't lose him for free or whatever. But I definitely think we'll see him get a shot on the NHL within the next probably 18, 24 months.
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on Ryan Miller's situation and Anthony Stolarz if he sticks around with the team. And then next year you would think it'd be a Dostal Eric Sinek duo in San Diego, which is a lot of fun for the Gulls next year to have 2 pretty talented goaltenders like that in their system. And if Stolarz doesn't pan out, you would have to expect that Dostal is close to being the third in line there for the backup job behind John Gibson for the foreseeable future. So that kind of bumps Dostal and Eric Sinek up the pipeline there. You did give a shout out to Benoit Olivier Groux and Hunter Drew, and Shane asked in the chat how far out both of them are. I think just based off kind of the play style that Hunter Drew has, I think he's probably closer to making the NHL. He's never going to be a guy who puts up a ton of points, especially when you go up the levels
I don't know.
here. Well, he put
He's
up
an elite right wing right now. He's an elite right wing.
Yeah, that's the most
Don't
interesting
diss my guy.
development I've ever seen. I don't think
We have to talk. We have to find
we got to get him on the pod. We got to talk to him. I want to talk to him about his time in Slovakia in the off season here, where he put up like think it was like 112 PIMs in like 10 games. So,
He's a legend. He's an absolute legend.
but
Um,
I don't think he's necessarily far out. Like if the Ducks move on and from guys like Manson and maybe Shattenkirk and make some trades here, like he's a right shot defenseman, pretty high up in the depth chart. For guys who could make a debut here. Obviously, Gooley and Mahura are likely ahead of him to come up and play in the NHL in San Diego. But if the Ducks want to add kind of a physical presence to their blue line, I don't think it's hard-pressed to say that Hunter Drew could get an NHL debut, maybe late this year or into next season if he continues to play the way he is for San Diego. And I think as for Grew, I think it's a bit of a longer a longer path to the NHL for him. It's his first year of professional hockey, so he's likely going to spend the entire year with San Diego. But maybe with injuries next year, we see him squeak up in the lineup if he's producing with the Gulls, or if not next year, then another year out from that. Because I think he's eventually going to be an NHL player. I think just defensively, he's so good that he's going to become that kind of third line checking shutdown center who can be a mainstay on your penalty kill. So his floor is pretty high. For his ceiling, it all depends on how that offense translates from junior to the AHL and eventually to the NHL for Grew.
Yeah, I think, I would expect both of them to play 5 or 10 games next year. You could tell me that both of them started on the roster at the beginning of next season, played 5 or 6 games, weren't quite ready, but showed some promise and were sent back down and didn't play another game in the NHL next year. And you could tell me both of them became, regulars halfway through and finished 25 games played next year. I think I could see both of those being just as likely. I do think, like you said, just because of his style and his size, there might be a shot at seeing Drew sooner than not. But I wonder, we joked about it a second ago, but still, like, he has been playing forward in San Diego. And for a guy who was drafted as a physical project shutdown defenseman, he's a physical shutdown defenseman, but he was very clearly viewed as a project. There were significant holes to his game and things that he needed developed. And now, he had that great, ridiculous season before coming back over, and now he's playing wing in San Diego. And so I don't know what that does for his development. I don't know if that all adds up to him kind of being Brent Burns, Brendan Smith kind of a player. But I would definitely expect to see both of them up with the Ducks next season.
I definitely think he's closer to Brendan Smith than Brent Burns for sure.
Yeah, I know.
He could be, Carter Rowney's potential replacement on a Derek Grant, Nick Delorier line, where he comes in as a fourth line right wing.
What even? I don't even know. I don't understand how, of all of the defensemen that they had down there, they were like, we're going to put him in it forward.
Yeah, I don't even know where that comes from. I don't remember in any of my time of, kind of monitoring Hunter Drew's career path that he's played forward. I don't think he's ever played forward at junior, let alone at the professional level. But, I mean, they saw something that they like as him as a bottom six forward. And a lot of that probably has to do with just how much grit he has in the lineup. He's a perfect fourth line forward, I think, for the Ducks. Oh yeah, we'll label it as physicality if it makes you feel better. But the last prospect question we had before we get into our kind of last topic of the show here was about Braden Tracy and kind of his development. The WHL just began their season, I think, earlier last month, and Victoria is one of those teams that were a little bit behind the ball just because of their location in terms of starting. So Tracy has 3 games under his belt, went scoreless or pointless in his first game, has back-to-back 2-point games. So he's got 4 points in 3 games now. He's kind of become the forgotten man among Ducks prospects. There's a lot of excitement when he was drafted, a lot of scouting members in the social media community on Twitter were high on him because of how much he rose up the rankings from a potential 3rd-round pick to eventually a 1st-round pick for the Ducks. Fell off the wayside a bit in terms of hype just because he didn't have a great second season in the WHL, but he's still a guy to monitor that eventually, if he can figure things out offensively and become that kind of go-to guy that they expected of him, he could be a nice middle six option for the Ducks as an energy winger, a guy who can kind of chip in 20 goals here or there in an NHL season. I think he's a long ways away from the NHL, at least 3 or 4 seasons. But he's one of those guys that once you're competitive again, and he could slot into the lineup and be a really valuable piece. So it's one of those nice projects that you can kind of wait on, and eventually he'll make his way to the NHL just because of how skilled he is.
Yeah, I think, he is kind of exactly the player you want to take with a second first-round pick that you get in a deal like that. I think it speaks to how much and how fickle the conversation around prospects is in the NHL. There's 7 rounds to the draft. There's a draft every year. There's 7 rounds of 31, soon to be 32 names. There's names more that some of us hear that never get picked and all these other things. And, they're on your radar for a couple of months, and then some of them do and some of them don't make a leap or something like that. And then by the end of the next season, you're looking at the next set of things. And so kids can just kind of get lost in the thing. But like you said, he's still whoever he was when he was drafted, have the upside, the skill set, all that kind of stuff. So now he's in a position where he may be a little bit forgotten about, but he's still in the system. They're still going to work on developing his game and bringing out what they see in him. And if it hits, it's great. And if not, I think if nothing else, they got Zegras in that draft, so they're fine.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, he was the perfect second pick when you have 2 first-round picks. A bit of a project, a guy who kind of rose at the draft rankings late, and you reached a bit. Maybe he would have been a second-round pick if the Ducks didn't take him with that pick. But you have hopes that he rose for a reason, and that reach pays off. And I think there's plenty of time. I mean, the kid's not even. Absolutely. I don't even think he's 20 yet, or if he's 20, he's going to be turning 20 by the end of the year. So there's plenty of time for him to figure it out. We were going to get to Eric Stephen's kind of fan trade article that got put in. There's a lot of trades that we can go over there. I think we'll push that for Sunday's show because we are inching in closer to the trade deadline, and there's a lot that we want to cover and kind of go over with that. So we'll push that for Sunday. Yeah. The last thing I have to get to, because I put this in this show, and I have to get to it this show because I knew it would piss you off. But there was a lot of Habs writers writing about Corey Perry and his impact on their lineup this year, and the fact that Corey Perry has 7 goals in 26 games played for the Montreal Canadiens this year, and how nice it would be to have Corey Perry producing at that level in this Ducks lineup. Now, it's taken out of a lot of context here because Corey Perry in this lineup doesn't score 7 goals in 26 games. Montreal Canadiens lineup's a lot different than the Ducks lineup in terms of talent and the system they play and a bunch of different things involved there. So I thought it was funny, but I knew it would piss you off immediately saying, should Corey Perry have not been bought out and stuck around with the Ducks to improve their offense?
Well, it's just because, the whole thing is just talking about all this stuff about, why'd they buy him out, blah, blah, blah. It's like, they're not giving kids chances and they're not blah, blah, blah. So it's like, okay, which one do you want? Should they not have bought him out, or should they not be playing some of these younger kids? So we didn't get there the smoothest way, but we definitely got to the point where we're starting to see more younger guys than not in these lineups. They're giving these younger guys the opportunity to play. They seem to be handing the team over to them. I mean, we just saw tonight a power play that was all kids. I think it was, what was it? It was Volkov, Drysdale, Zegras, Lunderstrom, Comtois.
Yeah.
They really are starting to just give them things. And that's what we need because, as everybody likes to say, we're not that close to being a contending team. So what you need to do to get there is you need to get these growing pains and lumps out of the way sooner than not. So having him do well in Montreal and forcing the Canadian media to have to be nice to him because he's doing well in Montreal.
I love it.
It's great.
Yeah. Happy for the guy, too.
For him. He's awesome. That being said, he does not fit on this team. He does not fit with what this team is trying to do. If, theoretically, Henrique and Silverberg aren't on this team, then yeah, maybe you're in a completely different position, and those kind of veteran winger roles are kept by the two guys who maybe they should have been allowed to keep them. But we are where we are, and Silverberg and Henrik are on the team. Corey Perry's not, and it feels so silly and revisionist to say that because he has 7 goals on a good team playing a small role, that Anaheim was stupid not to bring him around to play maybe a smaller or bigger role on a far worse team where he would not be surrounded with the kind of talent that leads to, the skeleton of a Hart Trophy winner scoring 7 goals.
Corey Perry's contract, correct me if I'm wrong, was the same length as Ryan Getzlaf, right? So if he was still with the Ducks, it would have expired this year.
Yep.
So the only thing I can say to maybe defend the fact that the Ducks should have kept him around is I would argue that I would have rather traded Silverberg before signing him to a new contract and kept Corey Perry around. I think that's the only argument I would make. I mean, you're adding $3 million to the salary cap at that point, and the difference between Perry's contract and Silverberg's contract. But then you could also say maybe you should have also signed Adam Henrique to that contract extension and traded him when you did, and just kept Perry's contract around and let it expire 2 years sooner, or I guess 3 years sooner than Henrique and Silverberg's contracts will expire, and just let it come off the books. That's the only argument I can make there in defending Corey Perry for sticking around. And it has really nothing to do with his offensive production, and more so to do with just kind of contract management and not signing some of these older players to longer deals that eclipse the length of Corey Perry's contract, despite the fact that, Perry was making like $8.5 million. But you've now locked down, I think, around $11 million between Henrique and Silverberg for the next 3 years for guys who really aren't going to do much for your team. I think that's the only argument I can make for keeping Corey Perry around, because as DB Lowry mentions in our chat, like, he's also playing in the North Division, so of course his production is going to be high. He's playing the Sens. He's playing.
He gets to score on Frederick Anderson all the time.
He gets to score on Frederick Anderson. He's playing Markstrom and Rittich in Calgary, and Koskinen and Smith in Edmonton, as DB Lowry points out too. So it is definitely a division that is friendly for goal scorers this year, and Perry's getting all the opportunities he can to succeed in Montreal. And as we said, I'm more than happy for the guy to be having a good year, playing on what should be a playoff team, and getting another shot at playoff hockey, because, as we've seen, he still is a valuable player in this league. If you put him in the right opportunities to succeed, and you put him on a good team, he can still get things done. I mean, across a full season, this is a 20-goal year from Corey Perry. He's just scraping over 20 goals. I think he'd be averaging around 21, 22, and there'd be some slumps in there. So, but a 15 to 20 goal season from Corey Perry on a competitive team, it's not bad. It's not a bad year for him. So I'm happy. I'm happy he's doing well, because he had some stints in Dallas where he looked good, but for most of it was kind of a failed experiment for them. So for him to go to Montreal, which apparently is his kind of boyhood team, and do so well, is, he's always going to be my favorite player from the kind of the Ducks era that I got to watch the most. Where watching him come up from London, and then I ended up getting drafted by the Ducks, and some of the stuff he did in Anaheim was just unreal. So for him to have success now is great. I do selfishly wish he retired as an Anaheim Duck and didn't go anywhere else, but we're a bit past that now, so it is nice to see him doing so well in Montreal.
Yeah, so here's the thing. I completely agree with Henrique and Silverberg should have been traded, and you should have just let the Perry and Getzey contracts run their course together. Maybe, right now you're having a conversation with both of them. Do you guys want to move? Do you want to go together? Do you want to sign extensions? What are we looking at? Right? I totally think that's a perfectly legitimate thing to criticize for. But here's what happened. July 16th, 2018, I think it was July 16th is what I saw. 2018, Adam Henrique signs his extension. March 1st, 2019, Silverberg signs his extension. Then the summer of 2019 is when Corey Perry gets bought out. Once those two contract extensions are given and signed, at that point, buying Corey Perry out becomes the right decision to free up roster spots for more effective younger players. I agree that the process getting there was flawed and that he shouldn't have been put in that position. But from the place where that decision was made, it was a justifiable decision, and I don't think it was the wrong decision.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. I mean, once those 2 contract extensions were signed, it was kind of a death warrant for Corey Perry and his contract in terms of it getting bought out. It was just kind of the obvious option for the Ducks to take. Last question we'll end the show off with here is Perry related from Dave in our chat. He said, would you guys sign Perry to an extension past this year if he was still on the team? I think what makes that question so hard to answer is we have no idea what his production would have been like if he had stuck with the team. I'm imagining in this Ducks team, minus either one of, if not both, Henrique and Silverberg, it wouldn't have been that great. So if you did sign him to an extension past this season, if he had stuck around with the Ducks, I think anything above $3 million would have been way too much for him. And term wise, you would have been looking at like 1-year deals continually until he retires. He's still a guy that whenever he does decide to hang up the skates, I would love for him to sign like a 1-day contract and retire as a Duck. I think that would be something he would like to do and probably will end up doing, because I think he's such a big part of this organization. He's going to likely go into the Hall of Fame or be a guy who's up for that, and his name should be and probably will be up in the rafters with Getzlaf at some point.
Yeah, it's going to read 8, 9, 10. As far as signing him to an extension past this year, no, because of the expansion draft. I would have absolutely no problem doing the Marlo Thornton thing and just looking at them and being like, I will give you 1-year contracts until you decide you don't want to play anymore. We can negotiate what the numbers are. I'm not going to, make you sign for a league minimum out of disrespect or something like that. We'll figure out what makes the most sense for all parties involved. But I would do that every day. I wouldn't sign an extension because I don't want to risk losing them in the expansion draft. I know that sounds silly, but if you're going to sign a veteran like that to keep them around, you don't want to have to protect them, and you don't want to have them go somewhere else that wasn't of their choice.
Yeah.
So I would just wait until after the expansion draft was finished and sign them, and I would sign them to 1-year deals forever. I have no problem with that. I think they earned it.
The Ducks managed to trade Raquel and Silverberg this offseason, and you could get Corey Perry for $1 million, or league minimum, for 1 year in free agency this year. I would do it.
Every time.
I would do it.
Every time.
I would do it. Just why not, man? Why not bring him back? I don't care if he puts up 10 points across 82 games. I just want to see that guy back in a Ducks jersey just for the fun of it. Just because I know we're not going to be good next year. And I don't think they're going to attract any big fishes in free agency. And if it's league minimum, why not? 1 year league minimum for Corey Perry to come back in the Ducks uniform and play with Ryan Getzlaf for the swan song of their career. It's beautiful. I'll take it.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you right now, I would trade for Corey Perry. Like, let's say this coming free agency, he signs like a 2-year, $3 million deal somewhere or whatever. Towards the end of the year, he gets hurt and is out for the season. Comes into the beginning of the next year, he doesn't seem to quite look himself. He's eating up cap space. I would trade for him to bring him back to Anaheim. I love Corey Perry.
My caveat is there has to be some guys who actually vacate this lineup. Some of the veteran guys. It comes back to the original.
We got to push a couple of these guys out the door.
Yeah, it comes back to the original discussion we had for why they bought him out. Is you're blocking some young players from getting in. So the last thing you want to do is bring them back to block some young guys from coming into the lineup. So I mean, it's a pipe dream. I think at best maybe we see him sign a 1-day contract when he retires and comes back. But I definitely do miss the heydays of Corey Perry. Just being a pest and putting up 30-plus goal seasons with the Ducks. So maybe one day I will relive it.
I'm just waiting for somebody to fund the study for what mysterious condition Corey Perry has. This man has suffered from this his entire life, and never does anybody ask about him. It makes me very sad. For some reason, this man is afraid of blue paint to the fact that he cannot stand up anywhere near blue paint, and he always manages to fall down. And luckily there are very nice people around that manage to catch him when he does this, but his phobia is so bad he cannot stand still or stand up straight when there's blue paint around. And I think we should look into this because it's got to be very hard to live his life.
It's got to be super painful to live the life of Corey
I feel
Perry.
bad for him.
All right, well, that wraps up this show. We pushed it late, as always. But we'll be back for Sunday show. Pat, for everybody who's been asking for Pat is making his return. He has told me he is making his return for Sunday. Take that as you will. But Pat should be on the show Sunday night for his long-awaited return. I know all of you have been asking, where's Pat? Have we kidnapped him? No, we haven't. Pat will be back for the Sunday show after the Coyotes game. It might just be Pat solo, who knows? But Pat will at least be back for that show. So no more asking. You know when he's coming back now. And then after that, we do have post game scheduled up for this upcoming week for Tuesday after the Sharks game, Friday after the Avs game, and then eventually Monday the 12th after the back-to-back against Colorado and San Jose. That Monday the 12th podcast might be an interesting one because that will be wrapping up whatever happened earlier in the day for the trade deadline as well. That'll be our first game in a while, or probably in almost ever, that we've had a game on the same day as the trade deadline. So that will be an interesting one. We're closing into only 9 days away from trade deadline, so we might be seeing some action pick up in this next week here in terms of Ducks trades, and whether guys like Raquel and Silverberg or Manson or anybody else will be out the door. So we'll have to see. I hope for content's sake, we'll have a few trades that we can talk about, and maybe for Sunday's show, we'll be talking about Evgeny Svechnikov becoming the newest member of the Ducks. But for all you guys who came out live, we appreciate you guys coming out to the kind of a late show tonight. We know it was a late start to the game. And we'll see you guys all out there for Sunday night's edition of the show and Pat's return to the post-game show. Take care, guys.
Bye, everybody.